Okay, very much. Okay, moving on to item number 1 this evening's agenda. So, declarations of interest. Can I ask if any members have any interest to declare? Members provide any details of any interest they declare. Any interest? Claire? No? Okay. Moving on to number 2 on the agenda then. Apologies for absence. Claire, can I ask you to report on the apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillors Clancy, Johnson, Karimi, Gouvenou, Mancini, Boyle, Potter and Vincent.
Thank you very much, Claire. Moving on, you got the apology.
Yeah, it's Councillor Douglas. She's back. She is there. Oh, sorry. I couldn't tell. See, it's fantasy season, isn't it? There we go. She's got her in time. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
When I sat down, she wasn't here. I knew she was on her way.
Okay, great stuff. Excellent. Okay, well, moving on to item number 3 on the agenda. So this is the minutes of the council meeting held on 17th of October 2024. I'd like to refer members to the minutes on page 8 of the agenda. Can I ask members to indicate by show of hands if they're happy to approve them as a true and accurate record? Yep, that's passed. And can I ask if there's any matters arising at all from that? Councillor Mole.
It was just on item 161 on page 19, and I know there was a lot of debate around the LAF funding, but again it brings into mind the question around last year when we put the money from the overrun into grant funding rather than into the temporary accommodation, and just wondered whether or not that could be reviewed again because of the need for the temporary accommodation.
Yeah, we'll take into advice on that. Okay, great. Okay, if nothing else, we'll move on to item number 4 on the agenda. So this is minutes of the committee meetings. So I'd like to refer members to the minutes of the recent meetings of Cabinet, Planning, Audit and Overview and Scrutiny Committee from page 21 on the agenda. And that's just provided for information. Okay, cool. Okay, item number 5, announcements. So I'd just like to ask members to note the chairman's engagements on page 53. Moving on to announcements. So, for myself first, I'd like to, on behalf of everybody here, wish our residents in Broadland a very happy Christmas in this very special time of the year. And also, we'd like to give thanks to those people that have been working hard through the Christmas break to support our residents in Broadland as well. I think all members would wholeheartedly support that. And lastly, I'd like to thank all the members here. Happy Christmas and see you in the new year. But I'll now pass on to the leader to make her announcements. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's just one announcement, and it's really related to, I think you'll all be unsurprised to hear, the devolution white paper that was released earlier this week. Much trailed and long awaited, I'm sure. I welcome the release, having been and remaining supportive of the principle of devolution to the lowest possible level to benefit our communities. The government's been clear that devolution and local government reorganisation come hand in hand, and it cannot be seen as a choice. This will apply to all 2-tier councils across the country. It is clear they will be moving at pace with devolution deals and in establishing combined authorities across England. They will announce in late January which areas of the country will be in their priority programme. Before this, the government has asked the County Council to confirm by the 10th of January whether they are requesting the 2025 elections to be postponed. As part of this request, the county will need to provide a clear commitment to devolution and reorganisation. And just to be clear, this is a county council decision. We have no say in that at all. If the county council wishes to go forward on a priority programme, they will need to put that case to the minister and be able to accept that they would wish to postpone those elections. There's no other real detail around that. The white paper is very long. I'm sure you'll have a great time reading it. There have been a lot of meetings held from government that talk about how this is expected to proceed. It is clear that reorganisation is a requirement of devolution, even if they don't have to move at the same pace, but they are linked inevitably. And I feel that we have to be in the position in Broadland to engage proactively with all the other councils in our area. And we're talking about East Anglia here, we're talking about Norfolk and Suffolk. And we need to engage proactively, because if we don't, we risk being done unto, or done in, if you like. If we want to say, we have to be prepared to work with them. And that is why I have happily signed up to, well, not happily necessarily, but I have signed up to a letter to that effect, that Broadland is welcome, is willing to work towards looking at how that might pan out and what might come in the future, in the new year. So the detail of that is still not clear. The government will be writing to all councils in two-tier areas in January, asking us to submit reorganisation proposals, which we will work up in conjunction with each other. The criteria for this will be established by the government. We don't know exactly what those are yet. There are some indications in the white paper, but there is more information to come. And we do know that they are expecting proposals to be submitted collaboratively with our partners. So that is all councils working together to try to achieve the best we can. And I think from our point of view in Broadland, we would want to see that the best possible services are maintained. That is why I am willing to work towards that. So I await further details and the invitation from government, and I will continue to work with our partners to ensure the interests of our communities are recognised and protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Any members of the Cabinet? Councillor Riley, there.
Thank you, Chair. Just information, really, just in case councillors haven't picked up the information yet, but we have been given our provisional financial settlement, and for Broadland, at the moment, from what we're seeing, this would result in about 338,000 less than we settled on last year, and at minus 2.7 in terms of core spending. However, this is the consultation period as well, so we will be consulting back with government to say that we believe that we should have an increase. It's quite normal, happens every year actually, whoever the government is. So we'd hope to see an increase in that by the time we get to February, as occurred, as occurs in other years sometimes. We have also received, we will be receiving 1.9 million in terms of the recycled responsibilities. So that would be an advantage to the council, to say the least. So we welcome that. That's just by way of information. And of course, we'll be consulting the government in terms of the settlement. And that's about it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Managing Director?
Chairman, thank you. Only just to, on behalf of all of the officers of the Council, to wish all members a very happy Christmas and prosperous New Year for us all next year. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I've missed Councillor up here. There you go.
Thank you. Just to draw your attention, in case you've missed it, we're currently running safety and Broadland surveys across all of our social media channels. So if you could promote it to your residents, it's not just restricted to people who live here, but also people who work here and visit regularly. It'd be much appreciated, as the results from that will be used to form a women's safety charter. So the more people that complete the survey, the better the charter can be. So please share widely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, moving on to item number 6, so questions. I can advise members that we have no questions received from members of the public this evening. So on to number 7, so public speaking. I advise members that there have been no requests from the public to speak at the meeting. Okay, we'll move on to item number 8 on the agenda, so recommendations from the Cabinet meetings held on the 5th of November and 10th of December. So item 8A, the tenancy strategy. So can I invite Councillor Hartley to present recommendations from Cabinet, please?
Thank you, Chair. So there are a number of policies coming to Council today to move us ever closer to having all of the necessary infrastructure required to adhere to the regulatory and the statutory requirements of being a registered provider. It has become quite clear that becoming a registered provider is a complex area with significant oversight. It has therefore been necessary to take a coordinated approach to making sure that the Council is doing all it must to be compliant, whilst also making sure that the local approach is considered and reflected within the policies. So first up is the tenancy strategy. This allows the council to provide a local view on how they wish tenancies to be conducted within the district. This document provides guidance to all landlords and in turn provides the council with standards when operating as a landlord themselves. This also provides an infrastructure for any council-owned companies working within this arena. The key aspects of the strategy is to provide guidance and levels of expectations to social and private landlords in our district. The rent that is charged, the type of tenancy afforded to our residents, and the strategies within the council that may impact the service delivery. This provides officers and members a voice in a sector that we otherwise have minimal control. You have the full details of this policy in your papers, and I move it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hartley. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Councillor Thomas, to speak now or reserve?
I reserve the right, thank you, Chairman.
Very much. Any comments from any members on this item? No? Do you wish to respond, Councillor Thomas? No? Councillor Hartley, if you'd like to. Nothing to say? Okay. Okay, I'd like to refer members to the recommendation at page 54 and invite a show of hands, please. Unanimous. That's unanimous. Thank you much. Okay. Item 8B, so registered provider policies. Can I invite Councillor Hartley again to present the recommendations of Cabinet, please?
Thank you. So now on to our registered provider policies. These policies provide consistency of service and should reduce the risk of any challenge from the Housing Ombudsman. They are as follows, and bear with me. Void management policies for temporary accommodation. The void management policy outlines the council's approach to managing and repairing empty, void properties in order to meet statutory requirements, minimise void times and lost income, and to manage tenant expectations when moving into or out of temporary accommodation. Because rent is not realised on a void, it represents a loss, and the council aims to keep this loss to a minimum whilst ensuring that a property is repaired to an agreed standard and then let to a suitable applicant who we owe a statutory duty to as quickly as possible. The tenancy fraud policy. This policy supports Broadland District Council's commitment to making the best use of the housing stock that we manage. This means that we are required to investigate and deal with any potential instances of tenancy fraud and ensure fair use of our housing stock. The policy therefore outlines the Council's commitment to dealing with tenancy fraud. Temporary accommodation charging recovery of arrears policy. This policy details the framework used by the Council in the charging of rent and services to homeless households for the provision of temporary accommodation. The overall aim of the policy is to ensure that rent and service charges for TA are set at an affordable level, provide financial sustainability and meet the cost of delivering temporary accommodation provision. The specific objectives are to use a cost-effective and fair rent service charge setting process, to ensure TA is an affordable option to all and does not act as a disincentive to work, to ensure that sufficient income is generated to cover the cost of operating and managing TA, to ensure that rent and service charges are recovered to the maximum potential, and to use recovery practices which take into account a household's income whilst ensuring that those with the means to pay do pay. Antisocial behaviour policy. This policy supports Broadland's aims in addressing antisocial behaviour within its temporary accommodation. It defines ASB, outlines our responsibilities and sets standards for dealing with these ASB issues. The policy applies to residents living in TA and if necessary, we may take legal action under the terms of the licence agreements issued. However, we are committed to taking effective action wherever possible and where we consider they can provide an effective remedy. We recognise the importance of working collaboratively with the police to support and encourage their role in enforcing the law. We will also use the evidence they provide together with evidence we may obtain to take enforcement action where appropriate. That concludes all of the policies, and again you have the full details in the papers in front of you, and I move that we vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hartley. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Councillor Thomas, speak now. Reserve.
I reserve the right again, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, any comments from any members on this policy, on these policies? No? Okay, seconder, do you wish to speak now? Okay. Do you want to wrap up, Councillor? You said it was okay, right. So I'd like to refer members to recommendation to recommend that Council adopts the following registered provider policies: the void management policy, the tenancy fraud policy, temporary accommodation charges and recovery arrears policy, and the anti-social behaviour policy for temporary accommodation. Can I ask for a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Okay, moving on to 8C on the agenda then. So, review of environmental penalties. Can I invite Councillor Davis to present the recommendations from Cabinet, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is a review of environmental penalties. The report presents recommendations for reviewing Council's fixed penalty charge amounts for 3 waste-related environmental offences. There was a new legislation in July 2023 which raises the maximum penalty amounts that are legally prescribed. We've followed a matrix approach which addresses on a case-by-case basis according to culpability and harm of the offence. So it has various advantages in terms of refining the fixed penalty enforcement. So it gives you flexibility, gives us flexibility to recognise those 2 aggravating factors of culpability and harm. And it maximises that scope or the range of penalties to prevent and deter offending. So it's a balanced approach when dealing with individual offenders. There are 5 bands. One set is for householders and the other set is for other offenders, so that we're recognising that there may be serial offenders under other offenders, and so in terms of culpability and harm, maybe a higher fixed penalty. And recognising also there may be a householder who has contracted somebody who isn't a waste carrier, unbeknownst, and hadn't checked that, and so in terms of culpability is less of an offence. So the proposed changes are intended to optimise the deterrent and corrective effects of fixed penalty enforcement for these offences. And so, as portfolio holder for environmental excellence, I support the officer recommendations outlined in this report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Councillor Orber, thank you very much. Do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I reserve the right, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to invite comments from members. Any comments on this policy? No? Okay. Councillor Orber, do you wish to speak now? Is it okay? Councillor Davis, anything else to add? Okay.
Do you want to repeat the recommendations? Or
no, it's fine. We can go for it a second time. Okay, so I'd like for members the recommendation on page 54 to recommend that Council and agree and adopt the matrix approach and the full amounts of environmental crime fixed penalty charges as set out in Appendix 2 and Appendix 3. Agree and adopt the reduced amounts for early payment of those environmental crime penalties as provided in Appendix 1 and 2, and agree to implement the new penalty charges effective from 1st of January 2025. Can I have a show of hands there, please? That's unanimous as well, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 8D on the agenda here, so the permanent pavement licence regime with the report at page 96. Councillor Davis, do you want to present the recommendation from Cabinet, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the permanent pavement licensing regime. So previously the Council put temporary licensing arrangements in place for pavement licensing in 2020 to support the catering and hospitality sector during COVID. It was always the intention of government to put in place a permanent pavement licensing regime and continue with the streamlined application process for the placement of tables and chairs outside food and drink establishments. This permanent change was introduced under levelling up legislation, which also put in place transitional arrangements for existing licence holders in 2024. So there's a transition for those who have temporary licences. So the new permanent licensing regime is reflected in our pavement licensing policy, which incorporates extended consultation and determination periods for applications. So it's not a short period as it was during COVID, but an extended period to allow for proper consultation. The ability to move from annual licences to a 2-year duration, so a licence can be issued for 2 years, to carry out a review of our fees and charges following an increase in the capped fee amount set in legislation, and the adoption of the new enforcement regime to maintain public safety and a level playing field for licence holders. So the proposed fees and charges of £364.50 for first-time new applications, and 342.50 for renewals are set below the capped amounts under legislation of £500 and £350 respectively, because it follows the full cost recovery basis and methodology that we've used for the licensing fees and charges review for Broadland in 2023. So we're not going up to the maximum amount allowed, but it's based on full cost recovery. So the Licensing and Regulatory Committee on the 15th of November 24 requested that the permanent pavement licensing policy be amended with the inclusion of additional consultees to those that we have consulted with under the temporary pavement licensing provisions. So that includes local disability access groups, plus relevant district and county councillors. The delegations to officers were also amended with an additional inclusion to determine conditions based upon legal advice received. So on the 3rd of December, Overview and Scrutiny voted unanimously to recommend the Cabinet to consider the permanent pavement licensing provisions, report content, and recommend Council to adopt the proposed fees as I outlined, and as proposed at paragraph 4.2 and Appendix 1, and formally adopt the permanent pavement licensing regime and policy as at Appendix 2, and delegate authority to the named officers and for the purposes provided at paragraph 4.3. So as portfolio holder, I fully support the officer recommendations outlined in this report.
Thank you very much. Can I ask for a seconder, please, that one? Councillor Ward, thank you very much. Do you want to speak now or reserve? Reserve the right. Thank you very much. Okay, can I invite comments now from members on this item, please? Councillor Gurney, yep.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody. This was quite pertinent in our discussions about mobility and disability. I'm very pleased to see mentioned this evening by the portfolio holder. I had a few months ago the privilege of having to get around on a mobility scooter, and I don't need it at the moment, but I find it very difficult, and pavements are not particularly accommodating, especially where you have a narrow width, not a plaza or a whole road paved like you find in Norwich in the city centre, but predominantly in Broadland, where you find eateries and cafes and establishments that have only a small pavement outside them, where it would be not correct, I don't think, to clutter pavements with street furniture for those shops, such as tables and chairs. So we were very keen to include this aspect in the policy, because there were some of us on that committee that day who can appreciate some of the issues in trying to get about. So I'm very pleased that you did that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members wish to make comment on this? Councillor Milton?
Thank you. I note in the report at section 3.2 that since 2020, when the temporary licence was invoked because of COVID, there's only been a total of 2 pavement licences issued in total. And again, when you look at around the costs and cost recovery, this paper's been through many panels and committees and various other things, and the cost involved in developing the policy seems to have far outweighed any of the benefits that it brings.
Okay, then. Would you like to respond to that one, Councillor Davis? At the end. At the end, okay. At the end, okay. Seconder, do you want to comment now, or? You can. Let's have debate and over to yourself and Councillor Davis. Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I think it was recognised, and thank you, Councillor Gunny, for mentioning the fact that we do need to recognise that any licensing has to take into account the availability of space outside premises for certainly adequate access around tables and chairs, and so and that leads on to the other point in terms of how many actual licences we've issued. It's not, as has been said, like Norwich, where we have wide pavements available for putting out tables and chairs. But of course, we do need a policy. We do need a system to be able to assess what is adequate and what is appropriate, and what might come along in future in terms of opportunities for the pavement licensing tables and chairs outside. So I think it's good that we've got that policy in place. We know where we're at. It's very logical and clear in terms of how the fees have been arrived at. So it provides reassurance as well that it's a fair way of approaching this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Okay, so I'd like to refer members to the recommendation on page 54 to recommend the council to adopt the proposed fees and charges, to adopt the payment licence and regime and policy, and to delegate authority to the named officers in the report. Can I invite a show of hands for that, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, moving on to item 8E on the agenda then, so the revised on reasonably persistent complainants policy. Can I ask Councillor Roper to present that one, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose to Council the revised unreasonably persistent complainants policy. This is one of those policies that you hope we never have to use, but nonetheless we do need to have in order to support the operations of the Council. You'll see the report on page 115. The Council has had such policy since 2021, but is now revising it in the guidance in view of new Ombudsman guidance. You'll see that the policy is now more transparent than before in terms of that it's now published. You'll see that there is a clear process and that it provides a greater level of corporate oversight to how we deal with this type of complainants. As I say, it's a policy we hope we never have to use, but it's good that we have it there if we ever need it, and I'll move the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Roper. Can I ask for a second, please, for that? Councillor Starland, thank you very much. If you want to speak now or later?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that in the past, as a group leader, I had to deal with a member of my group who was on the end of malicious and unreasonably persistent complaints, and there wasn't really anything in place to deal with it other than us rebutting the complaints that were made about this councillor, but simply because they had supported a planning application within their ward and a local voter objected to that, and then they were faced with a barrage of emails and complaints, and I was as group leader as well, which we just had to bat away and hope that the person would get bored, which eventually they did. So I think it's really good that there is a policy in place for dealing with occurrences like this, which also can help support staff and councillors in the future should this occur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I have any comments from any members on that, please? Any comments? No? Councillor Roper, nothing to add? Okay, I'd like to move us to vote. I'd like to refer members to the recommendation on page 55 to recommend to Council to adopt the revised on reasonably persistent complainants policy for Broadland District Council. I'll vote by show of hands, please. That's unanimous as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, moving on to item number 9. This is the Gambling Act 2005 Statement of Principles on page 125. Can I invite Councillor Davis to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Statement of Principles, Gambling Act Policy Review. So under the Gambling Act 2005, the Council is required to have in place a Statement of Principles. And this is our Gambling Act policy for Broadland District Council. The policy must be reviewed every 3 years, and our current policy document expires on the 31st of January 2025, so it's important that we have it in place. The licensable gambling activity in Broadland mainly extends to a couple of betting shops, licensed premises for alcohol with notifications or permits for gaming machines and small society lotteries. We have no casinos in Broadland. The revised policy before Council today incorporates updates from the Gambling Commission to local authorities to put in place best practice measures requiring gambling operators to engage with vulnerable and or underage persons and ensure consistency with neighbouring authorities. Our officers, in our professional officers and the licensing team have put in place these changes for the latest policy review. Officers have consulted with Licensing and Gambling Acts Committee before and after a 6-week period of public consultation that took place in late summer 2024. So the revised policy consultation went out to representatives and quite a list of the gambling industry, gambling charities, statutory consultees, licence holders and organisations acting on behalf of the public. The consultation didn't generate a single consultee response and affords Council assurance that the protective measures being proposed by our latest Gambling Act policy review would be accepted and implemented by the gambling sector and embraced by our local licensed operators and permit holders. And therefore, as portfolio holder for environmental excellence, I fully support the officer recommendations outlined in this report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Can I ask for a second for that, please, then? Councillor Harvey, do you want to speak now or reserve the right?
Reserve the right, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments from any members on this item? No? Okay. Councillor Harvey, do you want to say anything? Or?
No, other than should we have a casino pop up, it's great to have something to protect vulnerable people from it. So it was good to go through this in committee and fully support it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davis, anything to wrap up? No? Okay, great. Okay, I'd like to refer members to the recommendation on page 129 of the agenda to adopt a finalised draft licensing policy, the Gambling Act 2005, Statement of Principles 2025 to 2028. Can I invite a show of hands on that one, please?
Unanimous.
That's unanimous as well. Great stuff. Okay. Item number 10 on the agenda, the Monitoring Officer Report on page 179. Can I invite the leader to present a report from page 179, please?
Thank you. Yes, there are a number of items in this report. I think probably I'll take them in order as far as the recommendations are concerned. So basically, Appendix A deals with the process for alternative budgets and amendments. Now, the reasoning behind this is that there is the Constitution at present is silent on this. There's no real structure for it. We have checked with other councils, including the County Council, to see what their processes are. And in fact, what we have tried to do here, and I think we have done quite successfully, is to align those with other councils. It makes the whole process somewhat more open and transparent and easy to understand, and hopefully will assist debate in the meeting when we come to it, should that be the case. So that's that element. You'll see all of that in Appendix A. All the different structures are set aside for that, including some tables to aid the decision making. The other items are the appointment of Councillor Berry to the Planning Committee. That's under Section 3. Appointment of Councillors Wymark and Emsell to the Electoral Arrangements Committee. That is on Section 4. And the appointment of Councillor Clancy to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is in Section 5. The other main item is about the option to end our subscription to the Local Government Association, and I'm going to be careful how I say this because there's a lot of S's in here, Strategic Aviation Special Interest Group. The reasoning behind this is we have had a councillor who has been on that board. I note that hardly any other councils send anybody to it. I don't believe it's in this area. I think it's held in London, so it's a national thing. And there hasn't really been any real activity with it. I think the other point is that we do appoint somebody to the Norwich Airport liaison committee, and I think that's really where, for Norwich and for us in Broadland, most of that activity lies. So it didn't seem really worthwhile continuing to pay a subscription to something which actually we have very little activity in, and I'm fairly confident that the person who's dealing with our, the liaison with the Norwich Airport will always report back and look after our interests in that respect. So we are recommending, therefore, that we would end the subscription with the national one, and I don't think I'm going to repeat that because I probably get in a muddle. And then obviously item 6 is simply to allow the monitoring officer to make any consequential amendments to the Constitution as a result of these changes. So I think that's really all I need to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask for a seconder for that, please? Councillor Yousafzai, yeah. Okay. Would you like to speak now or later?
I'll reserve the right, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments from any members on this report? Anything at all? Councillor Cobbleson?
Thank you, Chair. I don't agree with recommendation 1, Appendix A. I don't think an alternative budget should be published on the council's website because I think it will be very confusing for our residents. So I cannot agree with that. Thank you.
Any other comments from anyone else? Yeah, Councillor Riley there.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Yes, 1.1 actually puts into a transparent situation any proposals that affect the residents in terms of council tax setting, and that should be published. So the proposals that come from Cabinet through to Council for setting the budget have to be public now. That is right and proper, because we are talking about council tax money and all that goes with that in terms of representation from the public. Therefore, if you're setting an alternative budget, you clearly need to do the same thing in terms of transparency for the public. That's why the amendment's there, and I don't see really how you could proceed without it being there unless you want to operate in a cloak and dagger fashion in terms of proposing an alternative budget which will affect people in terms of their council tax. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, thank you. Councillor Starland, and I'll come to yourself next one. Councillor Roper.
Yeah, if we're emulating what other councils are doing, I don't believe there's anything in our data about our residents suggests that Broadland residents are insufficiently capable of understanding the same sort of budget procedures that exist across Norfolk and are used by Norfolk County Council. I, as a Broadland resident, slightly resent the fact that I'm being told that I may not understand something that's printed in an agenda, and I think actually many of the residents I represent would also. If it's good enough for Norfolk County Council, it's good enough for South Norfolk, it's good enough for Broadland, it's good enough for North Norfolk, why can't this be done in Broadland? I'm confused by that objection, so I support that we follow the same procedures that other councils are doing across Norfolk and beyond.
Thank you very much, Councillor Starland. Councillor Roper next.
Thank you. I hear what Councillor Coppelston is saying. I think that the way in which this would be published by the council, which I assume would be via a supplementary paper with the council agenda, would probably clear up that confusion. And if you want to draw a parallel, if you look at the county council, where the main budget is published with the council papers, and then a short time before the actual meeting happens, a supplementary paper comes out with any amendments or alternative budgets on it. And it makes it clear where those alternatives have come from. Clearly, after the meeting and when minutes are done, when budgets are passed, the budget is the budget, and that is presented on the council website, and people would refer to that rather than what necessarily is in the meeting papers. So I think how it is set out at the moment does offer us a clear process. I have to admit, I think this has only really come into play in the last 3 years. I think 3 years ago when I moved an alternative budget on behalf of the opposition. No, we did it, the first time we did it in the council papers, and it was published in the council papers alongside the budget as it was, which is probably a bit confusing. And then the next year we just moved it on the night because we thought that didn't really work last year. And then of course last year we had, or this year, rather, we had yourself and your amendment on the night, Councillor Weinmark. I think we received it. Anyway, I think to clear up any confusion in the future, I think this is a fairly clear process that we can take forwards. I think it does cover the points that Councillor Coppelston raises, in that there shouldn't be any confusion, and should mean that on the budget night, we've had a good chance to look at things in advance. We all know what we're voting for. It doesn't remove the right to move any small amendments on the night, should people need to. If there are alternative budgets, and that's defined within the report, that these should be published in advance.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Gurney next.
Yes, Chairman. I just wanted to speak about the SASIG, the Strategic Aviation Interest Group. We used to call it SASIG. Nigel Shaw was on that. The late Nigel Shaw attended that for a long time. He was very interested in it. It does have its benefits. I have no idea how much the annual subscription is in terms I don't know, it's not mentioned, I don't think. But what it did do was it did keep this council involved in policies a bit further and wider afield than Norwich Airport. I chair the Norwich Airport Consultative Committee as a county councillor, and it is very much concentrated and centric to the operation of the airport. I know that some of you on the top table come to my meetings. Broadland, I must admit, has a very good attendance, unlike other councils, so that's to our credit. But it does keep Broadland involved in what is going on with national legislation, in fact worldwide legislation in relation to aviation, and I think there is a balancing act there to have a look at the constitution of it and see if there is any further value, because as I said, Norwich Airport is very much about Norwich Airport, whereas the Strategic Aviation Interest Group is more about aviation nationally in the UK and further afield.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gurney. Any other members, any other comments on that? No. So back to Councillor Yusuf. Do you want to speak now?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to express my view regarding item number 1. I think in the interest of total transparency and openness, then we should accept point number 1 as brought up by the leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would the leader like to respond at all to close?
Yes, thank you. I think, well, I'll take the special interest group first, because actually I'm one of those people who's absolutely fascinated by airplanes, and I'm the sort of person who runs out into my garden with flight radar every time I see a plane go over if I think it's exciting. So I do take the point. I was slightly wondered whether it would make a difference to us, but actually on investigation I find that really, if you want to know about the legislation and we want to find those things out, that information is available, and perhaps we could suggest that, you know, it will affect Norwich Airport as well. So if they're not actually bringing that forward at their consultative committee, that might be something we want to suggest to them that we could do. I have to say, you know, I have been round Norwich Airport with the managing director, and it is really quite fascinating how they work. So, you know, I take your point, Councillor Gurney, but I do think that in this instance, I'm not sure there's enough value for us from it, but we might find another way of actually accessing that information if we need to. The other point about the amendments, I think one of the things I would stress here is that what we're actually trying to do is achieve a good and open way of having that discussion. And I think one of the things I found slightly disturbing last time was that I'm one of those people who has to read something and think about it and analyse it in order to be able to actually come up with a really good argument. And I think one of the best ways of us being able to have that discussion is if we are able to look at all the options prior to the meeting and then have that open discussion. So I really do think it's quite important. I think the other telling thing is that if other councils already have this in their constitution, we're not doing anything unusual. In effect, actually, we're more unusual by not having something in the constitution that does that. So I do honestly recommend to you that we actually accept all these proposals, and I hope you will vote in that vein. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, can I refer members to the recommendation at page 181? So the recommendations, listen.
Yeah. Would it not be possible to vote on 2 till 6 in one block and then give us the chance to vote on number 1 separately?
We can vote separately on those recommendations if you wish to. Two separate blocks you're suggesting, Councillor Empson. So, number 1 separately to number 2 till 6. Okay, we shall do that then. So, let's take one. So, the first recommendation we'll vote on. So, the recommendation the Council approves number 1, which is the addition of the Constitution in relation to the process for alternative budgets and amendments to the budget as outlined in Appendix A of the report. So, can I invite members by show of hands to approve that recommendation, please?
23, Chairman.
That's 23 in favour. And those against?
Chairman.
16 against. So that recommendation is carried as is. Okay, we'll move on to the remaining recommendations. That's recommendations number 2 through to number 6. So can I ask members to vote by show of hands of that, please?
Looks unanimous, Chair.
I think Councillor Gurney. Councillor Gurney, you hands down on that one. I thought you put your hand up or down. You put your hand up. I couldn't see it. Sorry, apologies. It was unanimous. Thank you very much. Great. Okay, moving on to item number 11 on the agenda. Then, this is outside organisations, which is on page 184. So can I ask members to note the following reports from members representing the council on the following outside bodies: so the Norfolk Health and Wellbeing Board and Norfolk and Waveney Integrated Care Partnership report submitted by Councillor Hartley, the Integrated Care System Conference report submitted by Councillor Lamon, and the Broadland Futures Initiative submitted by Councillor Davis. Okay, that's right. On to item number 12. So this is questions from members then. So 12A is the question from Councillor Harvey. So can I invite Councillor Harvey to ask his question? You have 2 minutes to ask this question.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm asking this question to the portfolio holder for environmental excellence. Off the back of, I'm sure all members have seen successive flood events, both in the UK and around the globe. After the hottest and wettest period in the UK on record, and we've got thousands of climate scientists believe that responding to the climate and ecological emergency needs to be a priority. So I feel personally it should be discussed in some form at most meetings about the impact our policies have around that. So politicians have and are failing us. That's what people are saying in Wales now. That's what people are saying in Valencia now. It's what more and more people will be saying is the impacts of climate breakdown come home to roost. We've got floods, wildfires, extreme weather and sea level rise. They're already impacting us, and we're vulnerable in Norfolk as farmers or residents. We can see that there was an article in the EDP about it yesterday, actually. I don't know if you saw that. So successive governments and councils have failed really to address climate breakdown, meaning emissions are still going up and we're still failing to adapt to a rapidly changing climate or introduce sufficient mitigation. So my question is, what are we going to do to ensure we don't fail Broadland residents? Do we have adequate plans in place to respond to extreme weather events, fires or flooding? I recognise it can take years to prepare policies, measures, budgets, resources to get everything that we need on from a resilience point of view and be on the front foot. And essentially, what are we going to do to prepare for our own Valencia, which was horrific? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Councillor Davis to respond. And you have 5 minutes, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. So there's a lot to say here in terms of making sure that we are aware of what we have in place at Broadland District Council. So thanks for the question, which highlights the vital importance of recognising the reality of the impacts of climate change and the need for us to mitigate carbon emissions, have policies and plans in place to adapt to changes in climate and respond effectively to the hazards when they hit us. So just reflecting on that, the new head of the Climate Change Committee, Emma Pinchbeck, has warned the government is not ready for the sort of extreme weather events such as Storm Dara recently, which brought 96-mile-per-hour gusts, 2 men dying during the storm, unfortunately, tragically, and thousands being left without power. And it was the 4th serious storm to hit the UK since mid-October. So she said the UK is off track and we must do more to prepare for scenarios like flooding and intense heat. Adaptations to homes and communities are needed immediately. The government's own climate risk assessment warned the impacts of changing environment could cost the UK billions of pounds a year. So there's also an economic imperative to act as well. A recent Environment Agency report found that 6.3 million properties, about 1 in 5 homes and businesses in England, are in areas at risk of river, sea and flash flooding. The analysis accounts for the impacts of climate change for the first time and warns it will be an increase in the number of properties over time. So we're looking at potentially 1 in 4 by 2050. And so we know Broadland isn't immune to the risk of flooding. It's important, therefore, that environmental factors are taken into consideration on planning decisions, for example, as the government presses ahead with the plans to build 1.5 million new homes and more homes across Broadland. and avoiding building on floodplains so we're not adding to the number of houses at risk of flooding. So what are we doing to protect communities from flooding and other hazards? So we work with partners across Norfolk. We develop and maintain a range of emergency plans to protect local communities from significant threats due to these foreseeable emergencies. Those plans are developed ideally with local communities and are tested to best protect those that might seriously be impacted. We do help to promote examples of good practice and changes, and the Councillor is a key partner in the Norfolk Resilience Forum and the Norfolk Strategic Flooding Alliance. And through these partnerships, we're considering what wider actions can be taken to protect our local communities from severe weather and flooding. The Civil Contingencies Act 2004 established local resilience forums, which are multi-agency partnerships made up of representatives from local public services, including emergency services and ourselves. This places a responsibility on the Council as a Category 1 responder to have plans in place to deal with emergencies, to warn and inform the public and to help communities, businesses and individuals to get their lives back to normal as quickly as possible. So as a partner within the Norfolk Resilience Forum, we have developed emergency response plans, which have evolved over several years based on operational experience. The Council Emergency Response Plan describes the organisational arrangements for managing our response to a major emergency, as well as identifying a number of specific operational procedures dealing with specific hazards. In an emergency, the Council have two main roles, so response and recovery. So during response, we're assisting the emergency services, and during recovery, we'll take a lead role in coordinating the activities of various local organisations to help affected communities. So the Council Emergency Response Plan, we've got here, works alongside the Norfolk Emergency Response Guidance, which provides an overarching multi-agency framework for all responders in Norfolk to follow. And they're also within the Resilience Forum produces multi-agency plans for specific risks such as cold weather, flooding, heat wave and severe weather. So I went through this in some detail because it's good for us to all understand what's in place and our particular roles and responsibilities. And I hope it gives a sufficient overview of procedures in place to respond to major emergencies. It recognises we do have to be prepared and ready to respond. But as Emma Pinchback said, we need perhaps to do more and constantly review our preparedness and readiness in terms of response and recovery. And our emergency planning officer is always available for further briefing of members if you want to find out more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey, do you have any supplementary questions to that at all?
Well, firstly, thank you for the response. And yeah, I guess just would it be possible perhaps to have a full member briefing on emergency planning at some point? Because I'm sure there'll be a lot of members that could be interested in, because it's a question of probably when, not if at the moment. So if there is a possibility of a full member briefing on the full emergency planning stuff, that would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davis, do you wish to respond to that?
I think so we have two emergency planning officers working for Broadland District Council and South Norfolk Council, so we have coordination there. I'm sure they'd be willing and prepared to provide briefing for members. I think there was one after the last election, but I think given our concern about increased hazards and flooding in particular, they'd be happy to be able to arrange something. I don't know if we can look at that and get something in the new year, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, on to 12B, which is the question from Councillor Crotch. Can I invite Councillor Crotch to come and ask this question? He's got 2 minutes.
Chairman, thank you. Would the portfolio holder tell us what plans the economic development team at Broadland have to support our farming communities in light of the government's family farm tax?
Councillor Booth, if you'd like to respond, you have 5 minutes.
Yep. Firstly, I don't know of any family farm tax. It sounds as though farmers are going to be taxed if they want a family. What I assume Councillor Crotch means is the changes to the farmer's inheritance tax, where if they are a married couple, they have a tax-free allowance of £3 million, when the rest of us only have £1 million. They then pay 20% instead of the 40% that the rest of us pay. And then they have 10 years interest-free to pay it off, when the rest of us have to pay it within 6 months, or that we do have to pay interest? He asked what plans my economic development team have concerning this, and the answer is none, for two very good reasons. First, the job of the team is to help businesses start, grow, and be successful, and has nothing to do with tax. That's the job of accountants. Secondly, even if they were able to help, it will be 12 years before any farmer might be getting into difficulties, since the changes do not come in until 2026, so there'll be no point in planning now. What the team does, though, through our Business Builder programme, is to provide a range of support initiatives that are designed to help rural enterprises, including farms, to adapt, diversify and strengthen their resilience. Two of these support mechanisms are the Rural Business Builder Capital Grant, where eligible applicants can obtain a grant of up to £25,000 with match funding to help farms invest in infrastructure, equipment or diversification opportunities that will bolster their operations, increase profitability and lessen the impact of natural hazards. The second is the Broadland Business Builder Development Grant, which offers up to £5,000 of match funding to assist with measures that improve efficiencies, streamline processes or enhance market research, further strengthening the position of our local agricultural economy. As you can see, we already do a great deal to help farmers now, and that is our job, to help all businesses thrive in Broadland. I really think it is time that the opposition groups stop wasting the council's time with these overtly political questions and motions, which have nothing to do with what the council actually does, and obviously emanate from the Conservative Central Office.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I ask Councillor Crotchett any supplementary questions? You've got 1 minute.
Yeah, Chairman, thank you. It's a shame that the portfolio holder thinks it's a waste of time to talk about our farming communities, which are being hit hard at the moment by government, not just in this unfair tax that's coming that's going to affect probably 75% of farming families, but at the same time that they've just introduced VAT on fertiliser, which again is an additional cost to farmers at a difficult time when we want to see food prices stay low. We need to keep the cost of food down. We need to keep our rural jobs as a result of that and continue to protect the environment, building on the previous question. The agricultural property relief shouldn't be seen as a tax loophole. It's actually a way of enabling multi-generational families to operate in the highly competitive market, in a difficult and a volatile market. So turning to the Rural Business Builder Fund, which it has been a successful fund for Broadland, I agree with Councillor Booth on that. But at the moment, that fund has been fully funded within Broadland, unlike some of our...
That's your 1 minute, I'm afraid.
Okay. My question would be to, can you tell us what future funding for both the Rural Business Fund plus other funding, grant funding opportunities we're pursuing, and can you report that back to the Economic Success Panel in future? Future?
Yeah, I will.
Councillor Booth, you have 2 minutes to respond.
I'll report it back to the panel. We have just had the news that the Sustainable Fund has been renewed, and we will have the money to carry on the grants next year.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, going on to item 12C on the agenda then, it's a question from Councillor Nurden. So ask Councillor Nurden to ask his question. You have 2 minutes to ask your question.
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of council tax and the cost of providing services, could the portfolio holder for finance explain how the council will address the increased costs resulting from the increase in national insurance contributions announced in the government's autumn budget?
Thank you, Grant, for your question, and I'd just like to congratulate you as well. Out of 6 members that are wearing Christmas jumpers today, by far yours is the best. And it always is, Grant. I've always noticed that, by the way. And I think your fellow councillor next year is second, actually. And I'll leave out Natasha's antlers, obviously. So back onto your question. Grant. As you know, Grant, yourself and all of us as councillors and nationally, when the government announced the NI, the increase in NI, the NI contribution, none of us was clear about whether it was going to be exempt as a local authority or about whether it's going to be compensated in some way. So therefore, we've had to, myself and obviously the team, build into the budget the additional employers' national insurance contributions into our draft budget for next year. We've had to do that because we had no clue at that point. This will cost Broadland an additional £253,000. However, just yesterday, as part of the provisional financial settlement I referred to earlier on, the government announced an additional 515 million for local authorities in compensation for increased national insurance contributions. We don't, though, at this moment, have the details of the new NIC grant, which will only be released when the financial settlement is issued in late February. So how that's going to be divvied up, we're not exactly sure, but we are hopeful that we will receive full compensation for that. Summary, we have budgeted for it, but we hope we're going to be compensated for it, and it appears that we will be. So thanks for your question, Grant, and as I said, well done on the jumper. Thank you.
Councillor, you have 1 minute for a supplementary question if you've got it. It's about Christmas jumpers.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor O'Reilly, for your response. The present government was elected on a promise of change, and as they have demonstrated over the past few days, that change includes changing their minds. If they do change their minds and trash our best laid plans and do not come up with that contribution that you referred to, can you give us members and equally our staff and residents an undertaking that the burden of these increased costs will not be passed on to our residents through their council tax bills, or that our staff and contractors will not be negatively impacted? Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Yes, whilst I like to believe that this Cabinet and Broadland has extraordinary powers, we don't have the powers to legislate for NI contributions, of course. As I said, we're calculating in the budget for a balanced budget to cope with the NI contributions. I can't go through that in detail with you as you'd expect at the moment in terms of how we're going to balance that, and there are a lot of things still going on in relation to that. However, I would just reaffirm that the council has officially notified all councils, including the county council as well, that they will indeed compensate us, and that's all I have to say about it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Reilly. Okay, moving on to 12D. So the last question here from Councillor Lamb. Can I invite Councillor Lamb to ask a question? You have 2 minutes there.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask the Leader of the Council, can Broadland District Council offer the following vegetarian or plant-based food and drink options when catering for Broadland District Council events? So those are events not including joint events with South Norfolk District Council. So the options are as follows. Number 1, at least 25% ethically sourced vegetarian or plant-based food and drink when catering for Broadland District Council events. Option 2, where a menu choice is required in advance of a catered event, at least 25% of the food options offered will be vegetarian or plant-based. Option 3, where food is provided without a menu choice in advance, 25% of the food provided will be vegetarian or plant-based. And option 4, wherever possible, procure fresh seasonal food from local Norfolk businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I invite the lead to respond? You have 5 minutes to respond to that one.
Thank you. Yes, well, I believe we already do endeavour to provide some vegetarian and vegan options. I do take the point that more and more people are choosing to eat vegetarian and vegan food, in part because of the issues to do with the global greenhouse gases and the costs of to the planet of actually the multiple burdens that come from having more cattle and sheep, etc., than we actually need necessarily to provide the sustenance that we have. And I know that that's part of the reason that some people have chosen to go down that road. I think it's only appropriate that we do continue to increase our provision for that. I would also suggest, and I agree entirely, that sometimes what we are producing is kind of a bit boring, actually. And nowadays, I think we all know that there is some really good stuff out there that is really tasty, and I'd quite like to see us doing that. So I'm more than happy to sign up to endeavouring to make sure we get more and more vegetarian and vegan food. And I think most people, even if you do eat meat, will find actually they are quite tasty and well worth trying. Added to that, of course, I'm also going to suggest that we have a better selection of non-alcoholic drinks, because actually that's one of my particular interests, and I'm quite frankly, I'm a bit fed up with elderflower cordial, so I think I'm going to add that to the list as well. So there are a number of things I think we can do actually to make sure our events are catering for all of the tastes and also looking towards how we support our environment, and I'm very keen to do that. So I will be going into discussions about how we're going to do that and how we take that forward. And if you've got any other suggestions you'd like to bring, do come and have a chat with me. You might also be interested to note that the chairman has requested that the catering for his civic reception this year does not include the 14 major allergens. And I think that's really important as well, that we all factor in those things, because you have issues to do with colitis and such like that are caused by different type of gluten and so on, all the different ingredients that go into these things. So I think it's really important that we start to cater for everybody and give everybody an equal opportunity to have the things that they need and the diet that they require. And I think that the reason behind the chairman's choice, I believe, is because this year his chosen charity is the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, which I think you'll all agree is a very good charity to support. So I hope that answers the question. I am more than happy to take that away and work with people to see what we can actually bring forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lamb, do you have a supplementary question? 1 minute for that.
No, I don't have a supplementary question, but I would like to thank the leader very much for her response. Thank you.
Anything more you'd like to say? Okay, that's the last question there. So on to item 13, to motion, so I can advise the council that no motions received for tonight's meeting. And I declare this evening's meeting over, and happy Christmas to everyone, and see you in the new year. Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas, everybody.